Let's talk about the Panama Canal, a 51-mile shortcut that changed global trade forever. Before it existed, ships had to sail 13,000 miles around South America to get from New York to San Francisco. The canal cuts that to just over 5,000. It's a vital artery for world trade. Cars, bananas, electronics, and natural gas all pass through here. About 3% of global maritime trade and 40% of U.S. container traffic use the canal every year. The canal's engineering is mind-blowing. Massive locks lift ships over the Continental Divide, then lower them back to sea level. The newest locks can handle Neo-Panamax ships, carrying over 14,000 containers at once. When the canal runs smoothly, the global supply chain hums. But a snag, political or environmental, sends shockwaves worldwide. Control of the canal has always been a hot-button issue. For most of its history, the U.S. was in charge. That changed at the turn of the century, and now with new global powers rising, the question of who holds sway over this choke point is back in the spotlight. The stakes? Nothing less than the flow of global commerce and the balance of power, and the drama unfolding here rivals anything on TV. January 2025. President Donald Trump, newly inaugurated, takes aim at Panama in his speech. He accuses Panama of breaking promises and letting China control canal operations, threatening to take back the canal. This isn't just bluster. It's a direct challenge to decades of international agreement. The U.S. is anxious about China's growing influence, especially through C.K. Hutchison Holdings, which runs the ports at both ends of the canal. Panama's recent toll hikes, up to 200% for some cargo, add fuel to the fire, hitting U.S. shipping companies hard. To Washington, it looks like Panama is squeezing American interests while cozying up to China. The threat isn't about military invasion but about extreme diplomatic pressure. Stop, or we will. The Trump administration frames this as protecting American interests and countering China. But threatening a sovereign nation over its own canal is a risky move. Panama isn't backing down. The U.S. is gambling with its reputation and relationships in the region. The world is watching to see if this is a return to old-school American interventionism, and Panama is ready to push back. The stage is set for a showdown. Panama's response? Defiant and united. President José Raúl Mulino declares, "The canal belongs to Panama, that's not up for discussion." For Panamanians, the canal is a symbol of independence. Giving it up is unthinkable. Mulino warns the U.S. that threatening Panama could jeopardize cooperation on issues like migration. Panama launches an audit of Chinese port operators, signaling it's taking concerns seriously, but on its own terms. The region rallies behind Panama. Colombia, Mexico, and others condemn the U.S. threat as outdated gunboat diplomacy. The Organization of American States and the UN express solidarity with Panama. The message, the era of U.S. dominance in Latin America is over. Panama insists it's been a responsible, neutral steward of the canal. Chinese companies may run the ports, but Panama controls the waterway. The U.S., they argue, is manufacturing a crisis out of geopolitical anxiety. Panama is determined to defend its sovereignty, no matter the pressure. The world is taking sides. While the U.S. frets over the canal, China is building a rival the Shanghai deepwater port in Peru. With $3.5 billion in Chinese investment, Shanghai will let the world's biggest ships dock and create a direct Pacific-Atlantic trade corridor. This could make the Panama Canal less essential for South American exports, especially Brazil's soybeans and iron ore. China's Belt and Road Initiative is reshaping Latin America. 7 countries have joined, welcoming Chinese investment in everything from ports to power grids. Chinese companies are building EV plants in Brazil and expanding trade ties across the continent. For many Latin American nations, Chinese money is a welcome alternative to Western loans. The U.S. sees this as China buying influence, and maybe even military access, right in its backyard. Shanghai could one day host Chinese naval vessels raising alarms in Washington. The U.S. calls it debt trap diplomacy, but China is playing the long game. The economic map of the Americas is shifting. The U.S. is on the defensive, struggling to keep up. The canal's dominance is no longer guaranteed. The canal's biggest threat isn't just politics, it's water. In late 2023, a severe drought slashed water levels in the canal's lakes, forcing a dramatic cut in daily ship transits. Bottlenecks formed, ships waited weeks, and global shipping costs soared. The drought exposed the canal's vulnerability to climate change. To secure its future, Panama is raising tolls, sometimes by over 200%, to fund new water infrastructure. U.S. shipping companies are furious, claiming Panama is price gouging. Panama says the hikes reflect the real cost of keeping the canal running. The financial dispute is now tangled with geopolitics. Environmental, economic, and political storms are converging on this narrow waterway. The world's supply chain depends on a canal that's running out of water. The stakes have never been higher. To understand today's crisis, look back. The U.S. created Panama in 1903 to build the canal, then controlled it for 85 years. The Canal Zone was American territory, fueling resentment and protests in Panama. By the 1970s, the situation was untenable. President Carter negotiated the 1977 treaties with Panama's Omar Torrijos. The treaties abolished the Canal Zone, set up a joint commission, and guaranteed the canal's neutrality. The U.S. kept the right to defend the canal's neutrality, but not to intervene in Panama's affairs. On December 31, 1999, Panama took full control, a moment of national triumph. For the U.S., it was the end of an era. The legal and emotional legacy of those treaties shapes today's dispute. When Trump threatens to take back the canal, he's challenging decades of hard-won sovereignty. Old wounds are reopening, and the world is watching. The U.S. threat to retake the canal sparks global outrage. China calls it hegemonic bullying, using the moment to paint itself as a reliable partner. European allies are uneasy. Global trade depends on the canal's stability. International law experts warn that unilateral U.S. action would violate treaties and the UN Charter. Critics point out the hypocrisy. The U.S. condemns others for violating sovereignty, yet threatens Panama. The move risks emboldening rivals like Russia and China. Latin America is united, left and right, against U.S. intervention. The region's painful history with American meddling is still fresh. Leaders across the continent stand with Panama, defending its sovereignty. The message, Latin America is no longer America's backyard. Any attempt to treat it as such will meet fierce resistance. The Panama Canal crisis is about more than a waterway. It's a test of global order. The U.S. wants to reassert dominance. China is building new trade routes and influence. The canal's recent drought showed how fragile global supply chains are. New alternatives like Chancay threaten the canal's supremacy. If the U.S. and Panama can't resolve their differences, trade could shift, and America could lose out. Panama faces peril and opportunity, caught between two superpowers. Its challenge balances economic ties with China and historic links to the U.S. without losing independence. If Panama succeeds, it can leverage the rivalry for its own gain. If not, it risks becoming a pawn in a bigger game. This is a microcosm of the 21st century, old powers, rising challengers, and small nations fighting for sovereignty. The outcome will shape the future of global trade and international law. The world's eyes are on Panama, and the next move could change everything.